Chapter 1. The Nexus Discovery. The Nova Horizon was an engineering marvel, cutting through the vast expanse of space like a sleek, silent arrow. Its reflective hull gleamed in the light of distant stars, its advanced propulsion systems propelling it through the dark canvas of the far sector. Captain Mira Callan sat in her command chair on the bridge, her gaze fixed on the infinite expanse beyond the viewport. Space had always been her calling, an endless ocean of stars and mysteries waiting to be explored. But today, something felt different, a palpable tension simmering in the air. "Captain, we're approaching the anomaly," came the calm voice of Commander Tenya Rourke, her second-in-command. He stood beside her, tall and steady, his hands clasped behind his back. A sense of unspoken loyalty existed between them, forged through years of shared command. "Bring us out of warp and prepare to establish a stationary orbit. I want a full scan of that region," Captain Callan ordered. Her voice, firm but measured, carried the weight of authority. She had learned long ago that confidence bred competence among the crew. As the ship decelerated, the star-streaked view of the warp tunnel dissolved into the inky blackness of space, revealing the curious phenomenon they had come to investigate. Suspended against the backdrop of stars was a shimmering rift, a swirling vortex of energy, pulsating with hues of deep violet and iridescent blue. The phenomenon was unlike anything the crew had ever encountered before, as though space itself had been torn apart to reveal something beyond the known universe. The rift hovered dangerously close to the event horizon of a massive black hole, its gravitational pull visible in the slow spiral of cosmic dust and debris being drawn toward oblivion. Dr. Alara Voss, the ship's chief scientist, was already at her station, fingers dancing across the console as she directed the ship's sensors to probe the anomaly. Her bright green eyes were focused, analyzing the data streaming onto her screen. "Captain, I'm getting some unusual readings. The energy signature is off the charts, but there's something else. There's a signal embedded in the electromagnetic spectrum. It's faint, but it's there." Callan's brow furrowed. "A signal? From the rift?" "It appears so, but I can't decode it yet. It's unlike anything we've encountered. Alien, no doubt." Voss's voice held a mix of excitement and apprehension. As a scientist, new discoveries thrilled her, but the unknown always carried an element of risk. "Could it be a natural occurrence?" Tenya asked, though he knew better than to expect a simple explanation. Dr. Voss shook her head, a slight frown forming. "Unlikely. Natural phenomena don't transmit signals like this. It's almost as if the rift itself is some kind of gateway, a portal, maybe even a bridge to another galaxy. But I won't know for sure until we get more data." The idea of a gateway to another galaxy stirred something deep within Captain Callan. The universe was vast, but the discovery of such a rift could change everything. Exploration was in humanity's blood, and this could be the next great leap. But with opportunity came danger. The proximity of the rift to the black hole made any further investigation perilous, not to mention the unknown variables that could lurk beyond. "Helm? Bring us closer, but keep a safe distance from the event horizon," Callan commanded. "I don't want any surprises." The ship's helmsman, Lieutenant Soren Kale, acknowledged the order, deftly adjusting the controls. The Nova Horizon inched forward, its systems humming as they neared the anomaly. Outside, the rift seemed to pulse with greater intensity, as if reacting to their approach. On the bridge, the tension was thick, each officer focused on their tasks, but clearly aware that they were delving into the unknown. "Captain, I've isolated the signal," Voss said, breaking the silence. "It's definitely artificial. It's like a warning. The closest translation I can manage is, 'The gate must remain closed.'" Callan's eyes narrowed. "A warning? Who could have sent it?" "There's no way to tell, but whoever or whatever it is, they're warning us to stay away. The question is, why?" Before Callan could respond, an alarm blared across the bridge. "Captain, we have incoming!" shouted Lieutenant Kale, his hands moving rapidly over his controls. "Unidentified vessel, closing fast!" The view screen flickered, and the image of the rift was replaced by the sight of an enormous alien ship, unlike anything they had seen before. The vessel was massive, its hull jagged and asymmetrical, as if it had been cobbled together from the remnants of destroyed worlds. Dark energy crackled across its surface, and it moved with an unnatural, predatory grace. "Shields up," Callan barked. All hands to battle stations. The crew snapped into action, the bridge lighting shifting to a dim red as the ship entered combat mode. On the view screen, the alien vessel loomed closer, and before the Nova Horizon could maneuver, a blinding beam of energy shot out from the enemy ship, slamming into their shields. The impact rocked the ship violently, throwing several officers from their stations. "Shields holding at 60%, Tenya reported, gripping the edge of his console. "Return fire." Callan ordered, her heart pounding. Lieutenant Kale responded immediately, launching a barrage of photon torpedoes at the enemy ship. The torpedoes streaked through space, detonating against the alien vessel's shields, but the impact seemed to do little damage. "They're too strong," Kale muttered under his breath. "We can't break through their defenses." Captain Callan's mind raced. They couldn't outgun the alien ship, and their shields wouldn't hold much longer against another hit. "Helm, evasive maneuvers, get us out of their firing range." Lieutenant Kale executed the command with precision, and the Nova Horizon veered sharply away from the enemy vessel. The alien ship pursued them relentlessly, firing another barrage of energy beams that grazed the Nova Horizon's shields, causing more damage. "Shields at 30%. Tenya's voice cut through the noise of alarms. "We can't take much more of this." "Captain, we need to retreat," Dr. Voss shouted, her face pale as she clung to her console. Callan clenched her jaw. She hated the thought of retreat, but they had no other option. The enemy was far more powerful than anticipated, and they were too close to the black hole for comfort. "Lieutenant Kale, prepare for a full retreat. Get us back to warp," she ordered, forcing herself to accept the tactical withdrawal. Just as the ship began to pull away, the alien vessel unleashed one final attack, a massive energy beam that tore through space and struck the Nova Horizon squarely. The shields collapsed with a deafening crack, and the ship lurched as systems began to fail. Consoles exploded in showers of sparks, and the crew struggled to maintain control. "We've lost shields," Tenya called out, his voice strained. "Hull integrity is compromised." "Helm, warp speed now," Callan yelled. With the ship barely holding together, Lieutenant Kale initiated the warp drive, and the Nova Horizon shot forward, leaving the rift and its mysterious guardians behind. The ship's engines roared as they accelerated into the safety of warp space, escaping the enemy's grasp. But the damage had been done, and the cost of their encounter was heavy. As the ship sped through the stars, Captain Callan sat in her chair, heart pounding in her chest. The rift had been more dangerous than they ever could have imagined. The warning had been clear, but now, more than ever, she was determined to uncover the truth behind it. They had narrowly escaped with their lives, but the journey was far from over. The unknown awaited, and something deep inside told her this was only the beginning. Chapter 2. Into the Abyss. The Nova Horizon drifted through the silence of space, its once pristine hull marred by the battle it had barely survived. Emergency lights flickered along the corridors, and the low hum of the engines was punctuated by the occasional groan of strained metal. Captain Mira Callan sat in her private quarters, staring at the flickering display of the alien rift. Despite the ship's narrow escape, her thoughts were tethered to the anomaly and the alien vessel that had so violently defended it. The warning echoed in her mind: the gate must remain closed. The door to her quarters slid open, and Commander Tenya Rourke stepped in. His normally composed demeanor was strained, the weight of their situation evident in the furrow of his brow. "Captain," he began, "engineering is still working on stabilizing the power grid. We've managed to restore basic functions, but shields and weapons are offline. It'll be at least a day before we're combat ready again." Callan nodded, her eyes never leaving the display. "And the crew?" "Shaken, but alive," Tenya replied, his voice calm. "We lost 2 officers on Deck 3 when the alien beam hit us. A few others are in critical condition, but Dr. Alistair is confident they'll pull through." "Good," Callan said quietly, her jaw tightening. The loss of any crew member weighed heavily on her. "I want a full damage report within the hour, and keep me updated on our progress. We can't afford to be caught off guard again." Tenya gave a sharp nod and turned to leave, but before he could step out, Callan spoke again. "Commander, what do you make of that warning? The signal?" Tenya paused, considering his response. "It's hard to say. The message seemed clear enough. They don't want us near the rift, but the technology they used, that ship, it was centuries ahead of anything we've encountered before. Whoever they are, they've likely been guarding that rift for a long time. Callan's gaze finally shifted from the display, her eyes locking onto Tenya's. And that only makes me want to know more. We're explorers, Tenya. We can't let the threat of danger stop us from uncovering the truth. Tenya hesitated, then gave a slight nod of agreement. Understood, Captain, but we need to be careful. We've seen what they're capable of. Callan leaned back in her chair, exhaling slowly. Get some rest, Commander. We've all been through hell. As the door slid shut behind Tenya, Callan allowed herself a moment of silence. She knew what needed to be done, but the risks were growing with each passing moment. The mystery of the rift gnawed at her, but the lives of her crew hung in the balance. Down in engineering, Chief Engineer Jackson Reeve wiped a smear of grease from his forehead, glaring at the flickering diagnostic console in front of him. The damage to the ship's systems was worse than he'd initially thought. Several key power conduits had been completely fried during the attack, and rerouting energy to critical systems was proving to be a monumental task. "How's it looking, Chief?" asked Lieutenant Maya Thorpe, one of his best engineers, as she approached with a toolkit in hand. "Like we got hit by a goddamn starship," Reeve muttered, running a hand through his short, graying hair. "Shields are toast, weapon systems are down, and don't even get me started on the warp drive. I'll be surprised if we can get this thing running at half capacity." Thorpe gave him a tight-lipped smile, not entirely surprised by the grim report. "We'll get it done, we always do." Reeve grunted in response, turning back to the console. "Just keep an eye on the core temperature. Last thing we need is a meltdown on top of everything else." The crew worked in near silence, the usual camaraderie muted by the weight of their recent battle. Each repair was a step toward survival, but with every passing hour, the looming threat of the alien vessel and the rift remained. In the medical bay, Dr. Alara Voss stood over a console, analyzing the data they had collected from the rift. The warning signals still echoed in her mind, and despite the clear danger, her curiosity burned brighter than ever. The readings were unlike anything she had ever encountered. Anomalies in the fabric of space-time that defied known science. "Doctor," came a voice from behind her, and she turned to see Lieutenant Soren Kale standing in the doorway. His usually relaxed demeanor was gone, replaced with a somber expression. "Lieutenant," Voss greeted, gesturing for him to come closer. "I've been going over the data we collected from the rift. There's something strange about the energy signature. It's not just a rift, it's a dimensional tier. Whatever's on the other side of it isn't part of our universe." Kale raised an eyebrow. "You think it's some kind of portal?" "Not just any portal," Voss replied, her voice low with excitement. "I think it's a bridge to another reality, and the beings that sent that signal, they know what's on the other side. That's why they're warning us. They're not just protecting the rift, they're protecting us from whatever's beyond it." Kale's expression darkened. "If that's true, then going near that thing again might be suicide." Voss nodded, her excitement tempered by the gravity of their situation. "Which is why we need to figure out what we're dealing with before we make any more decisions." Later, on the bridge, Captain Callan sat in her chair, deep in thought, as the stars drifted past on the view screen. Despite the damage to the ship, she knew they couldn't just turn away from the rift. There were too many unanswered questions, too many unknowns that demanded exploration. "Captain, we're receiving a transmission," said Communications Officer Jarek Finn, his fingers flying over the console. "It's coming from a nearby system." "Put it through," Callan ordered, straightening in her seat. The view screen flickered, and the image of a humanoid figure appeared. The being was tall and imposing, with dark, metallic skin that seemed to shimmer under an unseen light. Its eyes glowed with a cold, unnatural light, and its voice, though mechanical, carried a sense of authority. "I am Zarion, emissary of the gatekeepers," the figure intoned. "You have trespassed near the Nexus. Your actions have been observed." Callan met the alien's gaze, unflinching. "We didn't intend to provoke a confrontation. We're explorers. We seek knowledge, not conflict." Zarion's glowing eyes narrowed. "Your intentions are irrelevant. The Nexus is forbidden. Those who seek to enter it risk the destruction of their entire world. You have been warned once. There will be no second warning. We don't want a war, Callan said carefully, but we also can't ignore what we've discovered. We have a responsibility to explore the unknown, to understand what lies beyond. You are naive, Captain, Zarion replied, his voice cold. The Nexus is not for you to understand. It is a gateway to realms beyond your comprehension. If you attempt to approach it again, you will face annihilation. Before Callan could respond, the transmission cut off, leaving the bridge in silence. The crew exchanged uneasy glances, the weight of the alien's threat hanging over them like a dark cloud. Captain, Tenya said quietly, we're in no condition to go up against them again. If they come back, we won't survive. Callan's eyes remained fixed on the empty view screen. She knew Tenya was right. The Nova Horizon was vulnerable, and they couldn't afford another encounter like the one they had just barely survived. But the mystery of the Nexus pulled at her, drawing her deeper into its orbit. Set a course for the nearest starbase, Callan said finally, her voice heavy with reluctance. We'll make repairs and regroup, but this isn't over. We're not done with the Nexus. As the ship's engines hummed to life and the stars began to blur into streaks of light, Captain Callan's thoughts remained on the alien emissary's warning. The Nexus was more than just a rift in space. It was a portal to something far greater, something far more dangerous. And whatever lay beyond, Callan knew one thing for certain. The answers they sought would come at a price. Chapter 3. The Rising Tension. The Nova Horizon glided through the black expanse of space, its hull scarred and its systems still under repair. The once pristine starship now bore the marks of its violent encounter with the gatekeepers, and its crew carried the weight of what they had seen, heard, and endured. Captain Mira Callan paced the bridge, her mind a whirlwind of conflicting thoughts. The warning from Zarion, the emissary of the gatekeepers, echoed in her mind like a storm she couldn't shake off. They had barely escaped destruction, and yet something about the Nexus, the alien rift they had discovered, still tugged at her. It was as if the pull of that strange anomaly had burrowed deep within her soul, and she couldn't ignore it, not even now. Even as the ship limped toward the nearest starbase for repairs, Callan couldn't silence the questions swirling inside her. Captain, Tenya Rourke's voice broke her concentration, pulling her back to the present. He was standing at the tactical station, his posture rigid, eyes trained on a set of sensor readings. We've just entered the Vectis Nebula. It's going to limit our visibility for the next few hours, but it's the most direct route to Starbase Orion. Callan nodded, grateful for the update, but her focus was distant. Any unusual readings from the nebula? Tenya shook his head. Nothing so far, but the interference in here makes it difficult to get clear scans. We should be safe, but we'll be flying mostly blind until we clear the nebula. Understood, Callan replied. She glanced around the bridge, seeing the exhaustion in the eyes of her crew. They had all been pushed to their limits, and she knew they needed time to recover, both physically and mentally. Yet the sense of unease that lingered like a shadow over her thoughts wouldn't let her rest. Captain, Communications Officer Jarek Finn called out, I'm picking up a faint signal on a secured frequency. It's weak, but it's not coming from any known Starfleet ship or installation. Callan's brow furrowed. Can you trace the source? Finn worked quickly, his fingers moving across the console. It's hard to pinpoint with all the interference from the nebula, but it's nearby. Less than 100 kilometers away. It could be coming from a ship hiding in the nebula, but there's too much static to know for sure. The captain's mind raced. The signal could be a distress call or a trap. In their current state, they couldn't afford another confrontation, but ignoring a potential ally in need wasn't an option either. Helm, bring us in closer to the signal, but maintain a safe distance. We don't know who or what we're dealing with yet, Callan ordered. Tenya, prepare the shields and weapons in case things get ugly. Aye, Captain, Tenya said, immediately working to reroute power from non-essential systems to their defense systems. Even though they were still damaged, they couldn't be caught off guard again. The Nova Horizon altered course, slowly edging toward the faint signal within the swirling mists of the Vectis Nebula. The swirling clouds of gas and dust outside the ship created a ghostly effect, the occasional flash of distant lightning illuminating the otherwise impenetrable darkness. The tension on the bridge was palpable as the crew worked in silence, waiting for something, anything, to reveal itself. Minutes passed and the signal grew stronger. Whatever was transmitting, it was close now, hidden somewhere within the nebula's shadows. The bridge was bathed in the low light of the ship's operational systems, casting long shadows over the crew as they focused intently on their tasks. "Captain," Finn called out again, "I've got a clearer reading. It's definitely a ship, but it's not broadcasting any identifying codes. It's just sitting there." "Put it on screen," Callan ordered. The view screen flickered to life, revealing the outline of a vessel barely visible through the thick clouds of the nebula. It was an unfamiliar design, sleek and angular, with dark reflective plating that seemed to absorb the faint light from the surrounding stars. There were no visible markings or insignias, and the ship appeared to be drifting, its engines powered down. "What the hell is that?" Tenya muttered under his breath, his eyes narrowing as he studied the vessel. "Scans?" Callan asked, her tone steady but tense. "Still too much interference from the nebula," Finn replied. "I can't get a clear reading on its power levels or life signs." Callan weighed her options. The ship could be abandoned, or it could be a trap. The lack of identifying codes made her suspicious, but they couldn't turn away without investigating further. "Helm, bring us in closer." "Slowly," she said. "Let's see if we can establish communication with whoever's on board." The Nova Horizon inched toward the mysterious vessel, its thrusters firing in small, controlled bursts. The eerie silence of the nebula was amplified by the tension on the bridge, every creak and groan of the ship's hull causing the crew to stiffen. As they closed the distance, Callan leaned forward in her chair, her eyes locked on the strange ship. "Jarek, open a channel," she commanded. "Aye, Captain," Finn replied, activating the communication array. "This is the Starfleet vessel, Nova Horizon, to the unidentified ship. Please respond." There was only silence in response. The nebula continued to swirl around them, the dark clouds obscuring any clear view of their surroundings. Finn tried again. "Nova Horizon, to unidentified vessel. We are offering assistance. Please respond." Again, nothing. "Still no response," Finn said after a few more moments of waiting. Callan stood, her instincts telling her something wasn't right. "Prepare an away team. I want to know what's going on over there. We'll board the vessel and see for ourselves." Tenya looked up from his station, clearly uneasy about the idea. "Captain, if this is a trap, we'll be ready for it." Callan interrupted. "But we need answers. We can't just leave this unexplained." "Understood," Tenya replied, though his concern was evident. "Take Lieutenant Kale and Dr. Voss with you. I want to know if there's anyone on board and if there are any survivors. I'll remain here and monitor the situation." Tenya gave a sharp nod. "I'll prep the away team." As the bridge crew worked to ready the mission, Callan stood by the view screen, watching the alien vessel drift in the mists. Her mind raced with possibilities, none of them comforting. The design of the ship was unlike anything she had seen before, even more advanced than the gatekeeper's vessel that had attacked them earlier. If the Nexus had drawn them into a new realm of dangers, this ship could be another piece of the puzzle. Minutes later, Tenya, Keel, and Dr. Voss stood in the transporter room, each wearing the standard issue away team gear and armed with phasers. They exchanged brief glances before stepping onto the transporter pad. "Stay sharp," Tenya said as they prepared for transport. "We don't know what we're walking into." The hum of the transporter filled the air, and in a flash of light, the three officers disappeared from the Nova Horizon, reappearing in the cold, dimly lit interior of the alien vessel. The air was thick with the smell of metal and ozone, and the lights flickered sporadically, casting eerie shadows across the narrow corridors. Kale drew his phaser, his eyes scanning their surroundings. "Looks like the ship's been abandoned for a while. No signs of life so far." Voss moved to the nearest console, brushing dust from its surface. "The systems are still active, but barely. Power levels are minimal." Tenya led them deeper into the ship, the oppressive silence weighing down on them as they moved. The corridors were cramped, with walls made of an unfamiliar alloy that seemed to shimmer in the low light. They passed through what appeared to be a central control room, its consoles dead and dark, and into a larger chamber that opened up into a wide, circular space. In the center of the room stood a massive, cylindrical structure, its surface covered in strange, pulsating symbols. It emitted a low hum, the only sound in the otherwise silent ship. Dr. Voss stepped forward, her eyes wide with curiosity. This is incredible, she breathed, studying the structure. I've never seen anything like it. It's some kind of energy source, but it's far beyond anything we've ever encountered. As Voss approached the structure, the symbols on its surface began to glow brighter, the hum growing louder. Suddenly, the room was bathed in a blinding light, and the away team staggered back, shielding their eyes. "Captain, we've got something here," Tenya shouted into his communicator, but before Callan could respond, the light consumed them, and everything went dark. Back on the Nova Horizon, Captain Callan watched in horror as the alien ship's hull began to ripple and shift as though it were alive. The signal from the away team had been lost, and now the ship itself seemed to be reacting to their presence. "Get them out of there," she shouted, rushing to Finn's station. "I'm trying, Captain, but something's blocking the transporter." Finn replied, frantically working at his console. Callan's heart raced as the alien ship continued to pulse with energy, the danger growing with each passing second. She had to get her crew back before it was too late. Chapter 4. The Awakening Threat. Panic spread across the Nova Horizon's bridge like wildfire. Captain Mira Callan stood tense, her hands gripping the back of her command chair as she watched the alien vessel on the view screen. The ship, once dormant, was now shifting in ways that defied all logic. The dark, angular hull twisted as if the material was alive, reshaping itself in response to something the away team had done. It pulsed with an eerie, pulsating light that seemed to flow through the ship like blood through veins. "Finn," Callan barked. "I need them back now." Jarek Finn was already working feverishly at his console, his fingers a blur as he tried to re-establish the transporter lock on the away team. "I've lost their signal, Captain. Something on that ship is scrambling the transporter beam. It's like the whole structure is shifting, messing with our systems." Callan cursed under her breath. "Keep trying. Divert any spare power we have into the transporters. I don't care what you have to do. Just get them back." A series of alarms began to blare across the bridge. Lieutenant Rourke, still manning the tactical station, glanced up from his console with alarm. "Captain, we've got movement inside the nebula. I'm picking up multiple energy signatures fast-moving. They're heading straight for us." Callan's pulse quickened. "Gatekeepers?" Rourke shook his head. "Can't say for sure, but they're not broadcasting any known signatures. Whoever they are, they'll be on top of us in less than 2 minutes." The Nova Horizon was still badly damaged from their previous encounter with the gatekeepers, and now with the alien vessel going haywire and the away team trapped on board, the situation was spiraling out of control. Callan had to make a decision, and fast. "Raise shields, but keep power prioritized to the transporters," Callan ordered, her voice tight. "Prepare for evasive maneuvers if necessary, but we're not leaving our people behind." Rourke's hands moved quickly over his console. "Shields up, but at 50% capacity, Captain. We're still rerouting power for the transporters." "Understood." Callan's jaw clenched. She turned to Finn. "What's the status of the away team?" Finn shook his head, his face grim. "Still no lock. The interference is getting worse. I'm trying to compensate, but..." Before he could finish, the alien ship on the view screen flashed with a bright, electric blue light. The ripple in its hull became more violent, and suddenly, the ship seemed to expand, its outer shell splitting open like the petals of a flower. From the core of the ship, a massive burst of energy radiated outwards, creating a shockwave that raced toward the Nova Horizon. "Brace for impact," Colin shouted, grabbing onto the nearest support as the ship rocked violently from the force of the blast. The bridge crew was thrown from their stations, alarms screaming across the ship as systems flickered and failed. The shields buckled under the sheer force of the energy wave, barely holding together as the Nova Horizon was pushed back, its hull groaning under the pressure. "Shields down to 30%, Captain," Rourke reported, his voice strained as he pulled himself back into his seat. "We can't take another hit like that." Callan gritted her teeth, her mind racing. What the hell just happened? Finn's face was pale as he stared at his console. That energy, it wasn't just a discharge. It's like the entire ship activated something massive. "Captain," Rourke shouted, his eyes wide with disbelief. "The energy signature's approaching us. They're changing course. They're not heading toward us anymore. They're converging on the alien vessel." Callan's eyes narrowed as she processed the new information. Whoever, or whatever, was out there had been coming for the Nova Horizon, but now their attention was focused entirely on the alien ship. The implications sent a chill down her spine. "Finn, keep working on getting the away team back," Callan said. "Rourke, I want a full scan of those approaching ships. I need to know what we're dealing with." The tension on the bridge was thick as Rourke worked to gather data. "Scanning now, Captain." A few moments passed in silence before Rourke spoke again, his voice filled with confusion. "Captain, those ships, they're not gatekeepers, they're drones, autonomous vessels, no life forms detected on board." "Drones," Callan repeated, her mind racing. "Who sent them? And why are they focused on the alien ship?" Before anyone could answer, the alien vessel emitted another pulse of energy, this one smaller but more directed. It shot out into the nebula, and the drones responded immediately, their movements becoming more erratic as they swarmed around the ship, circling it like predators waiting for the right moment to strike. "Captain," Finn called out, his voice shaking. "The interference is clearing. I've got a lock on the away team. Beam them back, now," Callan ordered. Within moments, the familiar hum of the transporter filled the bridge, and Tenya Rourke, Lieutenant Kale, and Dr. Voss materialized on the pad. They looked disoriented, their faces pale from the ordeal they had just endured. Tenya stumbled forward, catching his breath. "Captain, you're not going to believe what's on that ship." Callan approached him, her expression grim. "Talk to me, Commander. What did you find?" Tenya took a deep breath, his eyes wide with a mix of awe and fear. "It's not just a ship, it's a key. A key to something far more dangerous than we ever imagined." Callan's blood ran cold at his words. "A key to what?" "To the Nexus," Tenya replied. "The gatekeepers weren't lying, Captain. The Nexus is more than just an anomaly. It's a gateway. And that ship, it's the key that opens it." The bridge fell into a stunned silence. Callan's mind reeled with the implications of Tenya's words. If the alien vessel was indeed the key to the Nexus, then their discovery had far-reaching consequences. Ones that could endanger not only their mission, but the entire galaxy. "We have to destroy it," Tenya continued, his voice urgent. "If those drones manage to get that ship working, they'll open the Nexus, and once that happens, we'll be facing a threat unlike anything we've ever seen." Callan turned to Rourke. "Can we destroy it?" Rourke hesitated, glancing at his tactical readouts. "We don't have the firepower in our current state, Captain, not without overloading the warp core, and even then, it's a long shot." "Then we need to stop those drones," Callan said, her voice steely. "Whatever it takes." "Captain," Finn interrupted, his voice laced with fear. "I'm detecting another energy spike from the alien ship. It's about to." Before he could finish, the alien vessel erupted with another wave of energy, and this time, the Nexus itself responded. The anomaly that had once appeared as a distant tear in space began to expand, its swirling, chaotic energies growing larger and more violent. The entire nebula seemed to twist and distort as the Nexus pulled in the surrounding matter, like a black hole consuming everything in its path. Callan's heart pounded in her chest as she watched the Nexus begin to open. They were running out of time. "Prepare for evasive maneuvers," she ordered, her voice sharp. "We need to get out of here, now." As the Nova Horizon powered up its engines, Callan's mind raced with possibilities. They had stumbled upon something far more dangerous than they could have ever imagined. And now the fate of the galaxy hung in the balance. She couldn't let the Nexus be opened, not while there was still a chance to stop it. "Engage warp," she shouted. The Nova Horizon surged forward, its warp engines straining against the gravitational pull of the Nexus. As the ship accelerated, the view of the expanding anomaly shrank behind them, but the danger was far from over. Callan knew they had only delayed the inevitable. The Nexus had been awakened, and now it was only a matter of time before the true threat emerged from within. Chapter 5. Emergence of the Unknown. The Nova Horizon soared through the depths of space at maximum warp, its engines straining to outrun the impending cataclysm that the Nexus threatened to unleash. Captain Mira Callan stood at the center of the bridge, her mind racing as she tried to make sense of the whirlwind of events that had unfolded. The alien ship was a key, not just to any ordinary gate, but to something ancient and incomprehensible, a force that could tear apart the fabric of reality itself. "Status report," she barked, glancing at her crew, who were all working feverishly to maintain the ship's integrity after the chaotic encounter near the Nexus. Rourke, still at tactical, looked up from his console, his face grim. "We've managed to escape the immediate pull of the Nexus, Captain, but the anomaly is still expanding. We're picking up gravimetric distortions for light years in every direction. Whatever was keeping it stable before has been disrupted. If we don't find a way to stop it, it's going to swallow everything in its path." Callan's jaw clenched. "Is there any way we can communicate this to Starfleet Command? They need to be warned." Jarek Finn, still working at the communications console, shook his head. "We're too deep in the nebula. Subspace interference is off the charts. Long-range communications are impossible. We'll need to get clear of the distortion field before we can send a message." "And how far are we from the edge of the nebula?" Callan asked. "At least 6 hours at maximum warp," Finn replied, his voice tight. "And even then, we're not sure what kind of damage the anomaly could cause on its current trajectory." 6 hours. It might as well have been an eternity. The Nova Horizon was racing against time, and the crew was painfully aware of it. If they failed to find a solution, the Nexus would not only consume them, but would also pose a threat to the entire galaxy. As the ship continued its flight, Tenya Rourke, still recovering from the away mission, approached Callan with an anxious expression. "Captain, we can't just outrun this. We need to figure out what's going on inside that Nexus. There's something we're missing." Callan nodded, her thoughts mirroring his concern. "We need answers, and fast." Tenya gestured toward the science console. "There's something else. While we were on that ship, I picked up energy readings. Faint but distinct. It wasn't just the ship itself that was reacting. It felt like there was something alive within it, or maybe beyond it, inside the Nexus." Callan's brow furrowed. "Alive? You're suggesting there's some kind of intelligence at play here?" "I can't be sure," Tenya said, his tone cautious. "But whatever it was ancient, older than anything we've ever encountered. I felt it, like a presence, watching us. And now that the Nexus is opening, I think whatever is in there is waking up." The notion sent a shiver down Callan's spine. She had faced hostile forces before, enemies with technology far beyond their own, but this was different. This was something primal, something not meant for them to encounter. If Tenya was right, they were not just dealing with a spatial anomaly. They were dealing with an entity, something that had been dormant for eons and was now stirring from its slumber. She turned back to Rourke. "What do we know about the drones that were swarming the alien ship? Could they be related to this intelligence?" Rourke frowned, reviewing the sensor data they had gathered during the encounter. "It's possible, Captain. The drones seemed to be acting autonomously, but their behavior was almost defensive, like they were trying to protect the ship, or maybe even prevent something from escaping." Callan's mind raced as she considered the implications. If the drones were trying to keep the key from being used, then that means whatever is inside the Nexus is something they didn't want getting out. "That's my fear," Tenya said quietly. "We may have just triggered the release of something far worse than we could have anticipated." Callan's fists clenched. "Then we have no choice. We need to go back. We have to figure out what we're dealing with before it's too late." The entire bridge crew went silent at her words. Going back toward the Nexus, especially after they had barely escaped, seemed like a suicide mission. But Callan knew it was the only option. They couldn't outrun this. The Nova Horizon was the only ship close enough to do anything about the threat, and if they didn't act now, there might not be another chance. "Prepare to reverse course," Callan ordered, her voice steady despite the knot of fear tightening in her chest. "Rourke, I want weapons systems at full power. We'll need everything we've got if we're going to face whatever's out there." Rourke nodded, his hands moving swiftly over the controls. "Weapons online, Captain. Shields are still only at 60%, but we can hold for now. As the Nova Horizon turned back toward the expanding anomaly, Callan's resolve hardened. She knew the risks. She knew they were flying straight into the jaws of a nightmare. But they had no other choice. The galaxy's future depended on their next move. "Captain, I'm picking up a surge of energy from the Nexus," Finn said, his voice tense. "It's growing stronger. I don't think we have much time." "Understood," Callan replied. "We'll need to move quickly." The Nova Horizon accelerated toward the Nexus, its engines humming with the strain of the rapid course correction. On the view screen, the swirling maelstrom of the anomaly loomed larger with every passing second. It was a sight that defied all reason, a vortex of chaos that seemed to stretch into infinity. And somewhere inside it, something was stirring. Something that had been locked away for millennia. "Tenya, I want you to work with Dr. Voss to figure out a way to contain whatever is inside that Nexus," Callan ordered. "If it's truly an intelligence, there has to be a way to prevent it from escaping." Tenya nodded, though his face remained pale. "I'll do what I can, Captain, but this is uncharted territory. We're dealing with forces we don't fully understand." "I know," Callan said quietly, "but we have to try." As Tenya and Voss left the bridge, the atmosphere grew even more tense. The crew worked in grim silence, knowing that their mission had taken a dark and dangerous turn. The Nova Horizon was heading straight into the heart of the storm, and there was no turning back. The minutes ticked by with agonizing slowness as the ship approached the edge of the Nexus. The gravimetric distortions became more violent, rocking the ship as the anomaly's pull intensified. Every system on the Nova Horizon was stretched to its limits, and Callan knew they wouldn't be able to hold for long. "Finn, are we close enough to get a more detailed scan of the Nexus?" Callan asked, her eyes fixed on the swirling mass of energy before them. "I'm trying, Captain," Finn replied, his voice strained. "The interference is still strong, but I'm picking up some unusual readings." He trailed off, his brow furrowing in confusion as he studied the data. "Captain, this doesn't make sense. The energy signature, it's fluctuating, like it's being controlled. It's almost as if..." Before he could finish, the entire ship lurched violently. The lights flickered, and the bridge was bathed in a sudden, sickly green glow. The view screen filled with the swirling, chaotic energies of the Nexus as a massive surge of power erupted from within the anomaly. "Captain!" Rourke shouted, his voice filled with alarm. "We've got incoming, multiple energy bursts, heading straight for us." Callan's heart pounded in her chest as she watched the waves of energy racing toward the Nova Horizon. They had no time to react. The ship was caught in the pull of the Nexus, its systems struggling to maintain stability against the overwhelming force. "Brace for impact," Callan shouted, gripping the edge of her command chair as the ship was slammed by the first wave of energy. The impact was like nothing they had ever experienced. The ship was thrown violently to the side, its hull groaning under the strain. Consoles exploded in showers of sparks, and the bridge was plunged into chaos as alarms blared across every deck. "Shields are failing," Rourke reported, his voice barely audible over the cacophony of alarms. "We can't take much more of this." "Divert all available power to the shields," Callan ordered, her voice sharp. "We need to hold together. Just a little longer." But even as the crew worked to stabilize the ship, Callan knew they were on borrowed time. The Nexus was growing stronger, and whatever was inside it was no longer content to remain dormant. It was coming for them, and there was nothing they could do to stop it. As the ship lurched again, Callan's gaze locked onto the view screen, where the Nexus continued to swirl, its energies raging out of control. She knew they were running out of options. The Nova Horizon was caught in the grip of something far more powerful than they had anticipated, and if they didn't find a way to stop it, they would be consumed along with everything else. "Captain!" Finn's voice cut through the chaos, his tone filled with urgency. "I found something. A pattern in the energy bursts. I think it's trying to communicate with us." Callan's eyes widened in surprise. "Communicate? You mean it's sentient?" "I don't know," Finn replied, his fingers flying over the controls. "But it's sending signals, structured bursts of energy. It's trying to send us a message." For a moment, Callan's mind raced as she tried to process the implications. If the Nexus was trying to communicate, then maybe there was a way to stop it. but they had to understand what it was saying first. "Finn, can you decode the message?" she asked, her voice tight with tension. "I'm working on it," Finn replied. "But it's complicated, like nothing I've ever seen before." "Keep at it," Callan said. "It might be our only chance." As Finn worked feverishly to decode the message, Callan turned her attention back to the view screen, her heart pounding in her chest. The Nexus was no longer just an anomaly. It was a force, a presence, and it was reaching out to them. Whether it was friend or foe remained to be seen, but one thing was certain. They were on the verge of something far greater than they had ever imagined, and the fate of the galaxy hung in the balance. Chapter 6. The Nexus Awakens. The Nova Horizon hung in the void of space, caught in the gravitational grip of the Nexus. The swirling maelstrom of energy loomed ahead, its chaotic tendrils reaching out into the surrounding space like a living organism seeking to consume everything in its path. Captain Mira Callan stood on the bridge, watching the terrifying scene unfold on the view screen, her heart pounding in her chest. Finn worked feverishly at the communications console, trying to decode the strange, structured energy bursts they had detected coming from the Nexus. It was clear now that something, or someone, inside the anomaly was trying to communicate. But whether it was a friend or a foe remained a mystery, and time was running out. "Captain, I think I've isolated part of the message," Finn said, his voice tense with concentration. "It's not like any language we've encountered before, but the structure is unmistakably intentional. I think it's a warning." "A warning?" Callan's brow furrowed. "From who? Or what?" Finn glanced up from his console, meeting her gaze with an expression of deep concern. "I don't know, but the energy pattern seems to indicate that the Nexus isn't just an anomaly, it's a containment field. Whatever's inside it, it's been imprisoned for a very long time." Rourke, standing at the tactical station, turned toward them. "Imprisoned? You mean something's been locked away in there? And now it's trying to get out?" Callan's stomach tightened at the thought. The Nexus, which had already proven to be far more dangerous than they had initially realized, was not just a natural phenomenon, it was a prison. And something ancient, something powerful, had been trapped inside for eons. "What do we know about the energy signatures?" Callan asked. "Can we get a clearer sense of what we're dealing with?" Tenya Rourke shook his head. "The readings are all over the place, Captain. Whatever's in there, it's unlike anything we've ever encountered. The energy signatures are off the charts, and they're fluctuating constantly. I'm not sure if it's a life form or something else entirely." Callan turned to Finn. "Can you decode any more of the message? If it's a warning, we need to understand exactly what we're up against." Finn nodded, his fingers flying over the controls as he continued to work. "I'm doing my best, Captain, but this is incredibly complex. The message is fragmented, almost like it's been damaged over time. I'll need more time to fully decrypt it." Time was a luxury they didn't have. Callan knew that every second they spent near the Nexus was another second closer to disaster. The gravimetric distortions were becoming more severe, rocking the Nova Horizon with increasing intensity. If they didn't find a way to either neutralize or escape the anomaly, they would be torn apart. "Rourke, I need you to prepare for another barrage," Callan ordered. "If we can't communicate with whatever's inside that Nexus, we might need to take more drastic measures to shut it down." Rourke gave a grim nod. "Understood, Captain. Weapons are at full power, but I'm not sure how much damage we can do to something of this magnitude." As he worked at the tactical console, Callan felt a deep sense of unease settling over her. The Nexus was not just a spatial anomaly. It was alive in some way, or at least connected to something alive. And now that it was waking up, it was sending out signals that resonated with a sense of urgency, an urgency that they couldn't afford to ignore. "Captain," Finn's voice cut through the tension, his tone suddenly alarmed. "I've got more of the message decoded and it's not good." Callan turned to him, her heart racing. "What does it say?" "It's a warning, just like we suspected, but it's also a plea for help." Finn's eyes flicked back to the screen as he read the decrypted message. "The Nexus is a containment field for an entity, something the builders of this structure called the Eternal. It's been trapped in there for millennia, and now it's breaking free." "The Eternal?" Callan's pulse quickened. What is it? Finn shook his head. I don't know, Captain. The message doesn't give specifics about the nature of the entity, but from what I can gather, it's a being of immense power. The Nexus was designed to keep it locked away, but the containment field is failing. And if it gets out... He didn't need to finish the sentence. The implications were clear. If the Nexus was holding something as powerful as Finn suggested, then its release could be catastrophic, not just for the Nova Horizon, but for the entire galaxy. Callan took a deep breath, trying to steady her racing thoughts. They were caught in a deadly trap. The Nexus was unraveling, and the entity within it was on the verge of breaking free. If they didn't find a way to stop it, there would be no escape. But even as she considered their options, she couldn't help but wonder. What if there was more to the story? What if this entity, the Eternal, wasn't as dangerous as they feared? What if it had been imprisoned unjustly? Finn, Callan said slowly, is there any indication of who built the Nexus, and why? If this entity is as powerful as you're suggesting, why would they go to such lengths to contain it? Finn hesitated, scanning the data again. The message is fragmented, but it seems that the Nexus was built by a highly advanced civilization, a species far older than any we've encountered. They were trying to contain the Eternal because it posed a threat to their existence. But there's something else, something I can't quite make out. It's almost like... He trailed off, frowning at the screen. Wait, there's more. The builders of the Nexus, they didn't just trap the Eternal, they tried to destroy it, but they couldn't. So they sealed it away, hoping that no one would ever find it. Callan's heart sank, and now we've stumbled right into their ancient prison. It gets worse, Finn said, his voice grim. The message indicates that the Eternal has been reaching out, trying to communicate with other life forms for centuries. It's been trying to find a way out, and now that the containment field is breaking down, it's using the energy of the Nexus to fuel its escape. A heavy silence fell over the bridge. The stakes had just risen to an unimaginable level. The Nexus wasn't just an anomaly, it was a ticking time bomb, and they were standing at ground zero. We have to stop it, Rourke said, his voice low but resolute. Whatever this thing is, we can't let it get out. Callan nodded, her mind racing as she considered their options. Agreed, but how? If the builders of the Nexus couldn't destroy it, what chance do we have? There might be a way, Tenya said, stepping forward from the science station. The builders of the Nexus couldn't destroy the Eternal, but they did manage to contain it. If we can figure out how the containment field works, we might be able to reinforce it, at least temporarily. Callan's eyes narrowed. You think we can repair the Nexus? It's a long shot, Tenya admitted, but it might be our only chance. If we can stabilize the containment field long enough, we might be able to prevent the Eternal from escaping. But we'll need to act fast. The Nexus is collapsing more quickly than we anticipated. Callan's mind was made up. It was a desperate plan, but it was the only one they had. Rourke, Finn, I want you both to work with Tenya on this. Figure out how to stabilize the containment field. We'll give you whatever resources you need. As the three officers moved to their stations, Callan turned her attention back to the view screen. The swirling energies of the Nexus seemed to pulse with a life of their own, growing more chaotic with every passing moment. She could feel the weight of their mission pressing down on her shoulders. If they failed, the Eternal would be unleashed upon the galaxy, and nothing would be able to stop it. But even as she prepared for the battle ahead, a single question gnawed at the back of her mind. Was the Eternal truly the monster they feared, or was there another story hidden beneath the layers of ancient history and cosmic power? There was only one way to find out. Finn, Callan said quietly, her eyes fixed on the swirling mass of energy before them. I need you to try something else. While we're working on stabilizing the containment field, I want you to keep decoding that message. There might be something we're missing, something that could change everything. Finn nodded, his fingers already flying over the controls. I'll do my best, Captain. As the ship moved deeper into the Nexus's gravitational field, the crew braced themselves for the next phase of their mission. The battle to contain the Eternal had begun, and the fate of the galaxy hung in the balance. Chapter 7. Into the Heart of the Nexus. The Nova horizon groaned under the immense gravitational forces as it was pulled deeper into the Nexus. Captain Callan stood firm, her eyes locked on the swirling maelstrom outside the view screen. The crew around her worked with feverish determination, knowing that every second mattered. If the Nexus continued to unravel, the Eternal would break free and all hope for the galaxy would be lost. "Report," Callan commanded, her voice steady, though the tension in her eyes betrayed the gravity of the situation. Rourke's hands flew over the tactical console, his jaw clenched. "Shields are holding, but barely. We're taking heavy damage from the gravimetric distortions. If we get any closer, the structural integrity will fail." Callan nodded. "Keep us steady for as long as possible. We need to buy Tenya and Finn more time." At the science station, Tenya was deep in concentration, her fingers dancing over the controls as she analyzed the Nexus's intricate patterns. Finn worked beside her, his brow furrowed as he decoded more fragments of the ancient message. Together they were trying to unravel the mystery of the Nexus's containment field, hoping to stabilize it before the Eternal could escape. "I've isolated a new data stream," Finn said, not looking up from his console. "It's more coherent than the earlier fragments. I think we're getting closer to the core message." Callan walked over to the science station, her gaze focused on the stream of alien symbols that flickered across Finn's screen. "Can you translate it?" Finn nodded. "Yes, but it's not just a message, it's a set of instructions. Whoever built the Nexus left behind a blueprint for how to maintain the containment field." Callan's pulse quickened. "You mean we can fix it?" "It's possible," Finn replied, his tone cautious. "But the technology is far beyond anything we've ever encountered. It's like trying to repair an ancient machine with only half the manual. We can try, but there are risks. If we make a mistake, we could accelerate the breakdown instead of stopping it." Tenya spoke up, her voice measured but urgent. "Captain, the energy output from the Nexus is increasing. The containment field is destabilizing faster than anticipated. If we're going to do this, we need to act now." Callan weighed their options, her mind racing. There was no time to deliberate. The only chance they had was to trust in their abilities, and in the fragments of knowledge left behind by a civilization long lost to time. "Do it," she ordered. "Initiate the procedure and start reinforcing the containment field. Rourke, I want weapons at the ready in case this goes sideways." Rourke acknowledged the command with a grim nod, and the crew moved with practiced efficiency. The bridge was filled with a tense silence, broken only by the hum of consoles and the low rumble of the ship's engines fighting against the Nexus's pull. As Tenya began the complex sequence to stabilize the containment field, Finn continued to work on decoding the rest of the message. His face was illuminated by the glow of his screen, his eyes darting across the alien text as he pieced together the final fragments. "I've got something," Finn said suddenly, his voice tight with urgency. "The Eternal. It's not what we thought." Callan turned sharply, her breath catching. "What do you mean?" Finn looked up, his expression grave. "The Eternal wasn't just imprisoned, it was sentenced. According to the message, it was once a part of the civilization that built the Nexus. But it turned against them, became something else, something destructive. The Nexus wasn't just a containment field, it was a last resort. They couldn't destroy the Eternal, so they locked it away, hoping it would never be found." Callan felt a chill run down her spine. The pieces were starting to fall into place, but the picture they formed was far more terrifying than she had imagined. The Nexus wasn't just an anomaly, it was a warning, a scar left behind by a civilization that had been brought to the brink of destruction by one of its own. "So this entity," Callan said slowly, "was once one of them?" Finn nodded. "Yes, and now it's using the energy of the Nexus to escape." Rourke's voice cut through the tension. "Captain, we've got a problem. The gravimetric forces are intensifying. If we don't move soon, we'll be crushed." Callan's mind raced. They were running out of time. The only option left was to take a gamble, a dangerous one, but the alternative was certain death for everyone aboard the Nova Horizon, and potentially the entire galaxy. "Tenya, how close are we?" Callan asked, her voice tight with urgency. Tenya's hands flew over the controls as she monitored the progress of the containment stabilization. "We're almost there, but it's delicate work. One wrong move and the whole thing could collapse." Do we have enough power to break free from the Nexus? Callan asked Rourke. Rourke shook his head grimly. Not while we're still inside its gravitational well. If we can stabilize the containment field, we might have a shot at escaping, but right now, we're stuck. Callan turned to Finn, her mind made up. We're not leaving without stabilizing the Nexus. Keep working on that message. If there's anything in there that can help us, we need it now. Finn nodded and returned to his console, his eyes scanning the alien symbols as they scrolled across the screen. I'm close, Captain. Just a little more time. The seconds ticked by, each one heavier than the last. The Nova Horizon shuddered under the strain of the Nexus's pull, its shields barely holding. The crew worked in silence, their focus razor-sharp as they fought to keep the ship, and themselves, alive. Then, suddenly, the ship lurched violently, throwing everyone off balance. Alarms blared across the bridge as the gravimetric forces intensified, pulling the ship deeper into the anomaly. Captain, Rourke shouted over the din. We're losing structural integrity. If we don't get out of here now, we're finished. Callan gripped the arm of her chair, her knuckles white. Tenya, can we stabilize the field? Tenya's voice was filled with frustration. I'm trying, but the Nexus is fighting back. It's like it's alive, reacting to everything we're doing. Just as hope seemed to be slipping away, Finn's voice rang out. I've got it. The last piece of the message. It's a shutdown protocol. Callan's eyes widened. A shutdown protocol? Finn nodded, his fingers flying over the console. Yes, the builders of the Nexus left a way to deactivate the containment field in case of emergencies. We can use it to neutralize the Nexus, at least temporarily. Do it, Callan ordered, her heart racing. Now. Finn input the final sequence, his hands shaking with adrenaline. The ship trembled as the Nexus's energy pulsed around them, growing stronger with each passing moment. And then, with a sudden, deafening silence, the energy field began to dissipate. The swirling maelstrom outside the ship slowed, its chaotic tendrils retracting as the Nexus's power waned. The gravimetric forces lessened, and the Nova Horizon was released from its deadly grip. We're free, Rourke said, his voice filled with disbelief. Callan took a deep breath, her body trembling with exhaustion and relief. What about the Eternal? Tenya checked the readings. The containment field is holding for now, but it's fragile. We've bought ourselves some time, but the Nexus is still unstable. We need to get out of here before it collapses entirely. Callan nodded. Helm, set a course for the nearest safe system. Get us out of here. The crew moved quickly, the ship's engines roaring to life as it pulled away from the Nexus. As the distance between them and the anomaly grew, the tension on the bridge began to ease. But Callan knew the danger wasn't over yet. Finn, she said, turning to him, what's the status of the Nexus? Is there any way to permanently stabilize it? Finn shook his head. Not without more data. The shutdown protocol was a temporary fix. The Eternal is still in there, and it's only a matter of time before it tries to escape again. Callan's jaw tightened. Then we'll need to find a way to stop it, for good. The Nova Horizon moved into the safety of open space, but the looming threat of the Nexus remained. The crew had survived this battle, but the war was far from over. Chapter 8. The Calm Before the Abyss. The Nova Horizon drifted through the vast expanse of space, leaving the deadly Nexus far behind. But the scars of their encounter with the mysterious anomaly still lingered. The crew was exhausted, drained from the relentless battle against the gravitational forces, the cryptic alien messages, and the desperate scramble to stabilize the containment field that held the Eternal at bay. Yet, as the ship moved away from immediate danger, an eerie calm settled over them, one that felt far from comforting. Captain Callan sat in her quarters, staring out at the stars beyond her window. The swirling chaos of the Nexus still haunted her mind, and despite their narrow escape, she knew it was only a matter of time before the next storm arrived. The Nexus was far from dormant, it was merely biding its time, and they were no closer to finding a permanent solution. She leaned back in her chair, rubbing her temples. The weight of the decision they had to make pressed heavily on her shoulders. The Nexus wasn't just a random anomaly, it was a prison, and inside it lurked an entity far more dangerous than anything they'd ever faced. The question that gnawed at her now was not just how to stop the Eternal from escaping, but whether they could at all. Her door chimed, breaking her thoughts. "Enter," she called, and the door slid open to reveal Commander Rourke. His usually unshakable expression was grim. "Captain, we need to talk," he said without preamble, stepping inside and standing at attention. Callan gestured for him to sit, though she already knew what was coming. "Go ahead, Rourke." Rourke hesitated for a moment before speaking. "We've received a report from the Federation Council. They want us to return to Sol for debriefing. High Command is concerned about the instability of the Nexus, and they're ordering us to stay clear of it until further analysis can be conducted." Callan frowned. "They want us to just leave it alone? That doesn't make sense, not with the Eternal still contained inside." Rourke leaned forward, his voice lowering. "There's more. We intercepted a message. It wasn't meant for us, but it's from a faction within the Council that believes we should activate the Nexus fully." Callan's eyes widened in disbelief. "Activate it? Why would they want to release the Eternal?" Rourke's voice dropped even further, almost a whisper. "They believe the Eternal is not a threat, but a power source, a weapon they can control." Callan stood abruptly, pacing the room. "This is insane. If they even try, they'll doom the entire galaxy. They don't understand what they're dealing with." Rourke nodded. "I agree. But the Council is divided. Some believe the Eternal was imprisoned because of its destructive power, but others see it as the key to ultimate control. If we return to Sol, we might lose any chance of stopping this madness." The room felt smaller, more suffocating. Callan could hear her heartbeat pounding in her ears as the gravity of the situation set in. The Federation was teetering on the edge of a catastrophic decision, and they were caught in the middle. "We can't let them do this," Callan said firmly, her voice filled with determination. "If they release the Eternal, everything we've fought for, everything we've sacrificed, will mean nothing." Rourke nodded in agreement, his eyes dark with resolve. "What's our move, Captain?" Callan took a deep breath, gathering her thoughts. They were up against forces far beyond their control, but she wasn't about to sit back and let the galaxy fall into chaos. They needed allies, and they needed a plan. "We need to warn the other Federation fleets," she said, her mind racing. "There are those who will listen, those who understand the true nature of the Nexus. If we can rally them, we can stop this before it's too late." Rourke's brow furrowed. "It won't be easy. There are factions within the fleet that are loyal to the Council. If we make a move, they'll brand us as traitors." Callan stopped pacing, her gaze fixed on the stars. "I know the risks, but this isn't about loyalty to the Federation. It's about survival. If we let the Eternal out, we won't have a Federation left to be loyal to." Rourke stood, a glint of fierce determination in his eyes. "Then I'm with you, Captain, whatever it takes." Callan smiled, though it was tinged with exhaustion. "I knew I could count on you, Rourke. Let's get the rest of the senior staff together. We'll need everyone on board for this." As Rourke left to gather the others, Callan turned back to the window, her reflection barely visible against the backdrop of distant stars. The stakes had never been higher, and the path ahead was fraught with uncertainty. But she couldn't turn back now. They had come too far, and the fate of the galaxy was in their hands. The senior staff assembled in the briefing room, tension hanging in the air like a thick fog. Tenya sat next to Finn, her usually calm demeanor cracked by the stress of their recent ordeal. Finn looked just as worn. Dark circles under his eyes from sleepless nights spent decoding alien messages and running calculations. Callan stood at the head of the table, her voice steady but urgent as she laid out their next steps. "The Council is divided, and there are factions that believe they can control the Eternal. We can't allow that to happen." She paused, letting the gravity of her words sink in before continuing. "We're going to send a message to the other fleets, those we know we can trust. We need to rally them to our side, and make sure the Council doesn't make a move that will doom us all." Rourke chimed in. "It won't be easy. If the Council catches wind of this, they'll come after us. Hard. We'll need to move fast, and we'll need to be careful." Finn looked up from his console, his expression grim. "I've run the numbers. If the Eternal escapes, the Nexus's energy output will increase exponentially. We're talking galaxy-wide destruction. This isn't just a threat to the Federation, it's a threat to every living thing." Tenya nodded in agreement, her voice low but firm. The technology used to imprison the Eternal is far beyond anything we've ever seen. If we can't contain it, there's no telling how far the destruction could spread. Callan felt a surge of resolve rise within her. Then we do whatever it takes. We stop the Eternal from escaping, and we stop the Council from activating the Nexus. There was a murmur of agreement around the table, but the tension was still palpable. They were about to embark on a mission that could cost them everything, their careers, their lives, even the survival of the Federation. But there was no turning back now. We'll need to be smart about this, Callan continued. Our first priority is to get the message out without being detected. Finn, I want you to work on encrypting the communication so it can't be traced back to us. Finn nodded. I'm on it. Rourke, you'll need to prepare the ship for possible conflict. We don't know how the Council will react, and I don't want to be caught off guard. Rourke gave a curt nod. I'll make sure we're ready. Callan looked around the room, meeting the eyes of each of her officers. This is our fight now. We have to stand up for what's right, for the survival of the galaxy. No matter what happens, we can't back down. The crew nodded in silent agreement, their resolve as strong as their captain's. As they filed out of the room, Callan allowed herself a brief moment of reflection. They were heading into the unknown, with enemies on all sides and a ticking time bomb in the form of the Nexus. But she had faith in her crew, and she knew they would fight with everything they had. As the door closed behind her, she steeled herself for the battle to come. The calm had passed, and the abyss loomed ahead. But they would face it together, no matter the cost. Chapter 9. Unseen Forces. The stars outside the Nova horizon shimmered like cold diamonds, scattered across the black velvet of space. Yet, beneath that serene beauty, tension simmered. The Federation had sent its ultimatum: return to Sol and stand down or be branded as traitors. Captain Callan had seen this coming. The risk of their mission was always known, but hearing it from the Council's mouth made it real. And real was something she couldn't ignore. Inside the briefing room, Callan stood at the front, looking down at the senior staff gathered around the table. Their faces were etched with exhaustion, but also with resolve. The recent battles had taken a toll on them, and yet their unity was unshakable. Even now, as the Federation's grip tightened, there was no question among them. What they had started, they would finish. All right, Callan began, her voice steady but tinged with the weight of everything they were about to face. We know what's coming. The Council thinks they can control the Nexus, but we can't afford to let them make that mistake. The Eternal is not just a weapon, it's a force beyond anything they've ever encountered, and they're too blind to see it. Commander Rourke sat back in his chair, arms crossed. His face was tired, but there was a quiet anger in his eyes. So we fight, we try to rally the fleets that will listen, and we make our stand before the Council can act. That's right, Callan said, meeting his gaze. But we can't just fight. We have to outthink them. We're going to need all our resources, all our allies, and everything we've learned about the Nexus to stop them. We've been in worse situations, but this is different. We're up against something that could reshape the entire galaxy. Finn, who had been quiet up to this point, looked up from his console. The Nexus is still unstable, he said, his voice cold with the precision of someone who'd spent too long analyzing data. The containment field is holding for now, but if the Council acts too quickly, we won't be able to prevent an escalation, and with the kind of ships they're sending, we might not be able to outgun them either. Callan turned toward him. I don't care about the firepower. We've seen enough to know that brute force won't win this fight. We need to outsmart them, outmaneuver them. The Federation is divided, and we know which side of this battle we're on. We just have to make sure we have enough support when it matters. Tenya spoke next, her tone direct and focused. I've already sent out encrypted messages to those we trust in the fleet, but it's going to take time to gather them. If the Council moves first, it might be too late. We need to be proactive. That's what we're doing now, Callan replied. Rourke, I want you to prepare the Nova Horizon for the worst-case scenario. We can't rely on diplomacy anymore. We need to be ready for a fight. Rourke gave a nod. Understood. I'll start reconfiguring the shields and rerouting power. If things go sideways, we'll be in the best position we can be. Callan turned back to the team. We're going to need a few more things. Intel, weapons, and most importantly, a way to reach the other factions in the Federation that might not be in line with the Council's plan. We're going to need some leverage. Finn quickly typed on his console, pulling up the encrypted communications he'd intercepted earlier. I've been tracking some of the messages from the Council's covert factions. They're planning on deploying a special task force to the Nexus site. If we can intercept that task force, we might have a chance at stalling them long enough to organize our allies. Rourke looked up from his pad. That's a risky move, but it might give us the opening we need. Callan folded her arms, her mind racing. It's the only move we have. We'll have to move fast, and we'll need to strike first. No waiting for them to make a move. We need to control the tempo of this conflict before it spirals out of our control. I'll get to work on the task force coordinates, Finn said, already typing furiously. The rest of you know what to do, Callan continued, her voice now carrying the weight of a leader who knew the odds were stacked against them. Prepare for whatever happens. We don't know when the Council will make their move, but when they do, we'll be ready. As the crew dispersed to carry out their assignments, Callan stood still for a moment, staring at the projection of the Nexus swirling in the center of the room. It was a constant reminder of the looming threat. They had escaped it once, but there was no escaping what was coming next. The Nova Horizon had already ventured deeper into the unknown than any of them had ever anticipated, and the stakes were now higher than ever. Outside the ship, the stars seemed to stretch on forever, as though mocking their efforts. Yet, for Callan, there was a quiet resolve that burned within her. She'd seen the destruction the Nexus could cause, the way it warped space and time, and the unfathomable power that lay within it. The Eternal wasn't a weapon that could be controlled. It was a force of nature, and the Federation's blind pursuit of it could only end in disaster. They had to stop it, no matter the cost. Hours passed, and the crew worked tirelessly to prepare for the inevitable. Rourke had reconfigured the ship's shields, while Tenya had worked with the intelligence team to track down every lead they could find on the Council's covert operations. Finn was still deep in his analysis, trying to pinpoint exactly where the task force was going to strike next. It was in the dead of night, when most of the crew had gone to rest, that Callan received the transmission. The encrypted message flickered to life on her console. The voice on the other end was familiar but cold. This is Captain Rowe of the Vanguard. We've received your message. You're not alone in this fight. We're coming to you. Callan's heart skipped a beat, and a small but relieved smile tugged at her lips. Rowe, it's good to hear from you. Are you ready to move? We're already en route, Rowe replied. But we're not the only ones. A few others have rallied behind your cause, and we've got a small fleet gathering. It won't be much, but it's a start. The Council won't know what hit them. Callan's mind raced as she processed the new information. Allies. They had allies. It wasn't much, but it was enough to give them a fighting chance. Get here as fast as you can, Callan said. We'll be ready. As the message ended, Callan sat back in her chair, her heart pounding in her chest. The first pieces of their strategy were falling into place, but there was still so much to do, and time was running out. The next few days passed in a blur of preparation and anticipation. The Nova Horizon drifted closer to the Nexus, each passing hour bringing them closer to the confrontation they knew was inevitable. The ship was ready, the crew was as prepared as they could be, and allies were on their way. Finn had managed to intercept more communications from the Council, confirming that the Special Task Force would be arriving soon. Their mission was clear: to neutralize the threat the Nova Horizon posed and secure control of the Nexus. It was time to act. Ready as we'll ever be, Rourke said as he entered the command deck, his voice laced with determination. They'll be here soon. Callan nodded. Then we won't be here when they arrive. She turned to the crew. This is it. The fate of the galaxy is in our hands. No matter what happens, we fight. We stop them from releasing the Eternal, and we stop the Council from making a grave mistake. The crew gathered around her, standing tall despite the weight of their mission. There was no fear in their eyes, just resolve. They had come this far, and they weren't about to back down now. Callan's hand hovered over the controls, and for a moment, she simply stared at the stars ahead. The calm was over. The storm was about to hit. "We move out now," she said, voice firm. "Let's show them what happens when you underestimate us." And with that, the Nova Horizon surged forward, its course set toward the Nexus, ready to face whatever the Council and the unknown forces of the galaxy would throw at them. The tension on the bridge was palpable as the Nova Horizon raced toward the Nexus. The ship hummed with the steady thrum of its engines, but beneath that, a nervous energy stirred. The crew had their orders. They knew what they had to do, but the uncertainty of the upcoming battle hung heavily over them. They had no guarantee of success, only their conviction and the few allies they could rely on. Time was their enemy, and with every passing moment, the Federation's task force grew closer. "Status report, Finn," Captain Callan ordered, her eyes locked on the holographic display showing the swirling chaos of the Nexus ahead. Finn's fingers flew across his console, bringing up multiple streams of data. "Task Force ETA in 7 hours. They've been moving in formation. At this speed, they'll arrive at the Nexus before we can fully position ourselves." "Understood," Callan said, her voice sharp. "Do we have any new intel on their fleet composition?" Finn paused for a moment, then nodded. "The Federation is sending a fleet of 4 capital ships. The Karakis and the Aegis are the largest, both heavily armed. The other 2 are smaller, but they're equipped with heavy artillery and advanced jamming capabilities. They'll try to block our communications and hinder our ability to counterattack." "That's a problem," Rourke muttered. He tapped his screen, bringing up a tactical readout of the area surrounding the Nexus. "But we've got the element of surprise on our side. They don't expect us to strike first. We'll need to keep them distracted long enough for our allies to arrive." "I've sent out another message to Roe," Tenya added. "They're still a couple of hours out, but they're pushing their engines to the limit. They'll make it, but not in time to prevent the Federation from engaging us directly." Callan took a deep breath, her fingers drumming against the armrest of her chair. "We can't wait for backup. We'll have to handle the task force ourselves. But if we're going to do that, we need to keep them off balance." "Agreed," Rourke said. "We've got the Nova Horizon stealth capabilities. If we can get close enough to their flagship, we might be able to disable their comms and blind them long enough to make our move." Callan nodded. "Prepare the team for a boarding mission. If we're going to hit them where it hurts, we'll need to be inside their ships, taking out their systems from within." "I'll get the boarding pods ready," Rourke said, his face hardening. "We'll infiltrate and disable their defenses." The tension in the room mounted as the Nova Horizon accelerated, cutting through the void. The Nexus loomed ever closer, its swirling energy field flickering ominously as they approached. The crew continued to make preparations, double-checking every detail, from weapon systems to ship-to-ship communication protocols. There could be no mistakes. As they closed the gap, the first warning lights began flashing across the bridge. A red alert blared, sending a jolt of adrenaline through the crew. "Federation ships have entered range," Finn reported. "They've detected our approach. They'll be opening fire in T-3 minutes." Rourke's jaw clenched. "It's go time." "Lock onto their primary capital ship, the Karakis," Callan ordered. "Prepare all weapons systems. We're going to hit them hard and fast." A moment later, the Nova Horizon unleashed a torrent of plasma fire, its weapon systems roaring to life as the ship fired upon the Federation's flagship. The Karakis shimmered under the impact, shields flickering as the blasts slammed into its hull. "Direct hit," Rourke shouted. "Shields are weakening, but they've got secondary defense systems online. They're returning fire." "Brace for impact," Callan shouted, holding onto the console as the Nova Horizon shook under the return fire. The ship's hull groaned as plasma bolts collided with their shields, rippling outward with a burst of light. The ship bucked violently, but the shields held firm. Callan's heart raced as the sound of metal creaking filled the bridge. The Federation was not going to make this easy. "We've got incoming fighters," Finn yelled. "They're deploying interceptors." "Prepare countermeasures," Callan ordered. "Rourke, get us into a better firing position. We need to take down their fighters before they swarm us." Rourke's hands moved quickly over the controls, and the Nova Horizon banked sharply to the side, evading incoming fire as the fighters locked onto them. With a hiss, the ship's cannons fired once more, picking off several of the smaller vessels before they could close the gap. "We've got one locked on," Rourke called out. "It's going to be a hit." Just as the fighter's plasma cannon charged, Tenya jumped into action, diverting power to the ship's auxiliary thrusters. The Nova Horizon slid to the side, narrowly avoiding the incoming blast. The fighter, however, wasn't as fortunate. Rourke's shot sent it spiraling off into space in a fiery explosion. "Nice shot," Callan said, nodding in approval. "Keep moving," Rourke shouted, his focus unwavering. "We've got more incoming." Another wave of Federation fighters appeared on the sensor grid, and this time they were accompanied by the larger capital ships. The Nova Horizon was outnumbered, and the odds were increasingly stacked against them, but Callan wasn't about to back down. "Focus fire on the Aegis," she ordered. "We need to cripple their firepower and disrupt their ability to retaliate." The ship fired another round of plasma bolts, targeting the Aegis's shields. The energy shields shimmered with each impact, weakening as the assault continued. "Shields are at 70%, Finn reported. "They've got backup coming. More ships on the horizon." "We don't have much time before the next wave arrives," Rourke said, his voice tense. Callan thought quickly. "Initiate the boarding operation. We're going to take the fight to them." Rourke nodded, already prepping the boarding pods. "Getting them ready now. We'll have to move fast. Once we're inside, we'll sabotage their core systems." The Nova Horizon lurched again as more plasma shots slammed into the shields. The crew gritted their teeth and held on, knowing that this was the moment of truth. If they were going to win this battle, they had to act now. "Boarding pods are ready," Rourke announced. Callan's gaze locked with his, and without another word, they moved. The crew scrambled into position as the pods were ejected from the ship. They were small and fast, designed to pierce enemy hulls and deliver their crew straight into the heart of the Federation vessels. The pods hurtled through the void, locked onto the Karakis' hull. Within moments, they had breached the outer shell, cutting into the ship's interior with brutal precision. Callan and her team were the first to step out, weapons raised, ready to fight. The interior of the Karakis was a maze of dimly lit corridors, with the occasional sound of footsteps echoing in the distance. They moved quickly, clearing rooms and disabling security systems as they went. The Federation forces on board were caught off guard, unable to react in time as the Nova Horizon's crew methodically dismantled their defenses. "We're in," Callan said, her voice cold as she signaled for the others to move forward. "Head for the command center. We need to disable their control systems." Rourke led the way, his weapon poised as they cut through more Federation soldiers. The narrow hallways grew quieter, but there was no time to relax. Each step was a gamble, each moment another opportunity for their enemies to respond. As they approached the command center, Callan's heart pounded in her chest. They were almost there. The fate of the entire mission depended on this moment. If they could disable the Karakis' systems, they might just have a chance to turn the tide. Chapter 10. The Final Gambit. The final stretch of their journey through the Karakis was filled with tension. The crew of the Nova Horizon had breached the enemy ship, and now they were in the heart of the Federation's flagship, moving deeper into its maze of high-tech corridors and strategic command centers. With every step, the hum of machinery grew louder, the eerie glow of overhead lights casting long shadows on the walls. They knew they were close, but so were the Federation's forces. The command center was just ahead, and Callan could feel the pressure mounting. Time was slipping away. The Federation's fleet, now fully alerted to their presence, would soon be fully mobilized to stop them. The rest of the Nova Horizon crew was in constant communication, coordinating their attack, but the clock was ticking. The Federation's response would be immediate and decisive. If they failed to disable the Karakis' core systems, it would be game over. "We're almost there," Rourke said, his voice low and focused. "Keep tight, stay sharp. We're on the clock." Callan nodded, her mind sharp despite the chaos unfolding around them. She had been through countless battles, each more grueling than the last, But this felt different. This was not just another skirmish. This was their last shot at survival. They were fighting not only for the future of their ship, but for the future of their galaxy. Behind them, Finn and Tenya handled the rear guard, keeping the Federation's forces at bay, while Callan, Rourke, and the rest of the team moved forward. The Karakis was a vast ship, filled with countless rooms and levels, but they knew the command center would be their key to victory. Once they had control of the main bridge, they could disable the fleet's communication systems, giving them a chance to disable the rest of the Federation's forces before they could react. They rounded a corner and came face to face with a pair of Federation soldiers. Rourke's instincts kicked in, and before either of them could draw their weapons, he was already on top of them, disarming and incapacitating them with a few swift moves. The rest of the team followed suit, efficiently neutralizing any threats in their path. "Clear," Rourke said, wiping his brow. "Let's move." Callan's heart raced as they pushed forward. They were close now, so close they could almost feel the pulse of the ship's central command systems. The hum beneath their feet seemed to vibrate with an almost malevolent energy. As they entered the final stretch, they encountered more resistance. The Federation had anticipated a boarding attempt and had reinforced the area with additional troops. But nothing was going to stop them now. Finally, they reached the central door to the command center. The large, reinforced doors were secured with a series of high-tech locks designed to prevent unauthorized access. But they had the tools to break through. Rourke and Finn worked quickly, their hands moving with practiced ease as they hacked into the security system. "Give me 30 seconds, Finn muttered, his fingers dancing across his console. "I've got to bypass the final encryption." The seconds stretched into what felt like an eternity. Every passing moment was one step closer to either victory or utter defeat. Callan could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on her. They needed to disable the Federation's systems before their reinforcements arrived. Then, with a soft hiss, the door slid open. They were inside. The room was vast, with a circular control panel in the center, surrounded by holographic displays and banks of consoles. Federation officers scrambled to react, but they were too late. Rourke moved quickly, taking down the nearest officers with quick, decisive shots. Callan sprinted toward the control panel, her fingers brushing against the cool surface as she accessed the system. "Control's ours," she said, her voice steady. "Now let's make sure the Federation doesn't get their hands on it." Finn and Tenya worked quickly, setting up their devices to disable the ship's central systems. But just as they thought they had the upper hand, the doors behind them slid open once again. More Federation soldiers poured in, their weapons raised. The fight was far from over. "We need to hold them off," Rourke yelled, grabbing his weapon and firing toward the incoming threat. The room erupted into chaos as both sides exchanged fire. Callan ducked behind one of the consoles, reloading her weapon. The Federation forces were overwhelming in number, and they were starting to push the team back. The Karakis' command center was massive, and they were spread thin, trying to control both the systems and the constant stream of enemies. "We can't hold them off forever," Tenya shouted. "We need to finish this now." Callan nodded. "Rourke, get to the back of the room. Finn, you stay with me. We'll hold them off while you finish the override." Rourke didn't hesitate. He sprinted to the far side of the room, where the Federation soldiers were beginning to regroup. Gunfire erupted as he and his team laid down suppressing fire, allowing Finn and Tenya to get to work. But as the battle raged on, Callan could see the tide beginning to turn. The Federation soldiers were relentless, and their firepower was superior. The Karakis' security forces were well trained, and every time they pushed forward, another wave of soldiers emerged to replace the fallen. "We don't have much time," Finn yelled, his voice strained. "I'm almost there, just a little longer." Callan glanced at the screen. The Federation fleet was already regrouping outside. The Aegis and Karakis were preparing to launch another wave of fighters, and the Nova Horizon had already taken heavy damage. If they didn't act soon, they would lose their window of opportunity. A blast from the Federation forces sent debris flying, knocking Finn's device out of his hands. "No," he shouted, scrambling to recover it. "Cover him," Callan ordered. She leapt from behind the console and dove toward Finn, taking out 2 soldiers along the way. Her heart pounded as she reached him and helped him retrieve the device. With a final burst of energy, Finn managed to input the last sequence. The Karakis shuddered. The systems began to flicker as the Federation's control over the ship started to fail. "We're in," Finn said, his voice filled with relief. "It's done. The comms are down. The Federation fleet is blind." For a moment, there was silence in the room. Then, the Federation forces, realizing they had been outmaneuvered, began to retreat. But it wasn't over yet. Callan and her team had to make sure that the Karakis' systems were completely disabled before they left. Rourke motioned for the team to move out. "We've got what we came for. Time to get out." But just as they were about to make their exit, an alarm blared throughout the Karakis. The doors to the command center slammed shut, trapping them inside. "What the hell?" Rourke snapped, rushing to the door control panel. "It's locked. They've sealed us in." The ship shook again as the Federation launched a desperate counteroffensive. Callan's mind raced. They were trapped, but they still had a chance to escape. "We need to get to the evacuation pods. Finn, Tenya, help me with this door." Rourke turned toward the back of the room, scanning for another way out. "I'll cover you." The ship shook again, and the lights flickered. There was no time to waste. They had to escape before the Karakis self-destructed. Their only chance now was to leave the Federation behind and make it back to the Nova Horizon before it was too late. The Karakis groaned and shuddered beneath their feet, and the crew of the Nova Horizon knew that the final battle was far from over. They had won this round, but the war was still raging. Thank you for joining us on this epic journey. You've just traveled through the stars, ventured into the heart of battle, and survived the impossible with the crew of the Nova Horizon. Your presence makes this journey worth it. We can't thank you enough for sticking with us till the end, because this adventure has only just begun. If you enjoyed the thrill, the twists, and the suspense, like this video, share it with fellow space explorers, and don't forget to subscribe for more mind-bending tales that'll keep you on the edge of your seat. The best is yet to come. Be sure to hit that bell so you're always the first to know when our next mission launches. Until next time, the stars await.